Welcome to the SAP Retail Podcast. In this episode, we'll be discussing the FMI Midwinter Executive Conference that runs January 25th through February 4th, 2021. It is Friday, January 29th, and I'm your host, Evan Bowler, here with Randy Evans, Paul Larson, and Rick Wanger, all of us part of SAP's Retail and Consumer Products Industry Executive Advisory Practice, here to discuss insights taken from across the event. Rick, why don't we start with you? You've mentioned some great sessions you saw this week. Can you help us unpack some of the themes you saw across the event?
Thanks, Evan. Great to be here. Lots to cover. I think some of the big things that we're going to talk about here today is some of the business models and some of the things that we think are going to stick in 2021. Obviously, people have to be part of the transformation, so we're going to talk about some of the associates and how to engage the associates. Collaboration was a huge theme this week across grocery as well as the brands and manufacturing, which actually that's what FMI is all about. So I think that spirit of collaboration and how that's going to continue in 2021. And then we want to talk a little bit about technology. Obviously, we want to focus on the profitability and how can we leverage technology in the right places and the right situations to really drive the ultimate experiences our customers demand. Hey, Randy, how was your FMI?
Thanks, Rick. I have to say this is my 10th Midwinter and the very first virtual Midwinter. Didn't really know how it was going to go, but I have to say the content was spectacular, and I really got a lot out of listening to folks in the industry talk to what's tomorrow going to look like, the next normal in food retailing. The year 2020 has had a massive impact with multiple areas of the business, and it was great to hear from the industry what's tomorrow going to look like, what's 2021 and beyond, what's changed. Leslie Sarenson did the opening keynote, and I think she did a great job of talking to you can't go home again, I think was the theme. And it wasn't meant to be derogatory. It was basically saying, after all we've learned in 2020, whether it's COVID related or just personal relationships, she basically said, what you were doing back then is not what you're going to be doing in the future. The overarching theme was it's big change. And if you have a strategy of going back to where you were, that's probably not a great idea. She used the hockey analogy of skating to where the puck's going to be. And that theme kind of led throughout. So that was a grocery perspective, or a retail perspective, if you will. My colleague, Paul Larson, is also in attendance, and his focus is on food manufacturing. Paul, what did you see it?
Hey, thanks, Randy, for that introduction. Always a pleasure sitting on a panel with you and Rick. And Evan, thanks for emceeing this session. So it's a common theme. We've all been disrupted. I think Steve Kotler said it well in his speech about the speed of change and really how technology is supporting the trend and really supporting a lot of the different ways we're addressing the new normal. A comment that he made really caught my eye. He talked about the acceleration of acceleration. All of us have experienced the last 11 months in a similar manner. Our lives have changed quite a bit. The industry's changing. The consumer who we're trying to help through this time of change has been faced with 100 years of change that really will happen in the next 10 years. That really drives all of us to work together as an ecosystem. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more in our conversations, but from a CP manufacturer standpoint, there's a lot in common with the retailers in the industry. They work together to support the common good and help the consumer feed our families and go on with the next normal.
You know, Paul, that's a really good point. And I love the acceleration and the pace of change kind of comment. I think it's all centered around the consumer. If you look at the behaviors that are going to continue, and we've really kind of trained our consumers to enjoy that it's not just about having the lowest price and having product on the shelf. I think we've learned that convenience has become one of the key drivers to how consumers are going to experience a brand or experience a retailer. Availability this year has shown us that all the work that goes into making sure that we have product on the shelf is one of the primary drivers for a consumer's behavior. Having other elements around personalization or health and wellness or sustainability goals, all of these things are really driving a different aspect that the shopper and the consumer is really demanding beyond just price. Randy, you mentioned in some of our conversations how important associates and people are a part of the transformation retailers are going through. I think that's such an important piece. And I was listening to some executives over the last week even at NRF, and they were talking about how important it is to engage everyone in the organization in this radical transformation that's happening in retail. You want to talk about some of the things that you learned this week around the importance of people?
Sure, thanks, Rick. First and foremost, you could hear an underlying theme on almost every presentation, the awe and gratitude for the folks on the front line, these grocery workers that are standing in front of customers, potentially exposing themselves, and how much emphasis is put on how do we first make sure that the frontline worker is safe, but also emotionally engaged too. The amount of work, the incredible volume, the increases in that, the inability to staff properly, all those were components of conversations throughout most of the event. One of the ones that I attended was about diversity and inclusion, and it was really interesting. The folks spent a lot of time talking about ensuring that diversity and inclusion is not just a checkbox. It's an actual effort to not only increase those two metrics, but also to make sure that it drives business value. In the grocery industry, it doesn't generate revenue and income. It's usually short-lived, and it was pretty interesting to see them acknowledge that in the context of diversity and inclusion. It made some incredible points. Also, as you think about the employee, the productivity, all the things that go into managing a grocery store, a food retailing operation, there's a lot of times people get nervous about what technology does to the workforce. And it was really interesting in one of the sessions to hear them talk about automation and the impact that it would potentially have on the workforce and how it wasn't quite as negative as you think it is.
Randy, I completely agree. I'm seeing and hearing the same thing from customers and also saw it in some of the sessions here at FMI. Stuart Atkin of Kroger said it well. He said, let's talk about the key takeaways. And the first one is the health and well-being of employees and customers. It kind of confirms how this was the number one focus that was identified in the SAP Deloitte Industry Pulse Check survey that was recently published by CGT. Hundreds of consumer product senior leadership participated in the survey. And guess what? Health and well-being of employees and customers was the number one focus area. It's great to see that even our company at SAP, that's where we're focused on. And without that focus, we wouldn't be able to get through these times. So again, agree with that. I think if you look at a pivot point, everyone's tired. Everyone's been working 10x days, a different way of working. They've been stretched. And as my colleagues Randy and Rick said earlier on, challenged with a new normal. So this is really a great time to reset relationships between the retailer and the manufacturer to drive that collaboration in the whole ecosystem. So I look at this as a time and a trigger point to make a change. There's always a silver lining. I think this is one that we have.
Paul, you mentioned collaboration. I thought I heard, especially in the supply chain sessions, but almost in all sessions, the need for extensive collaboration. I think this year with the product shortages across multiple categories and empty shelves in grocery stores, which literally caused panics across the consumers industries, the need for true, transparent collaboration is absolutely necessary during those times of shortages. But going forward, the connectivity to the customer, having the customer drive the conversation means that there is no room for supply chain misses. And the collaboration strategies of these companies in the past has been confrontational with their supply chain partners. The pandemic and the shortages as a result of it created a glaring need for clear, transparent collaboration. A lot of times, my perspective, companies get into trying to collaborate in areas that are not necessarily optimal. But once you hit the supply chain, once you've decided we're going to do this, we're going to run this product on ad, we're going to put this product on personal offers, there's no reason to not have a completely transparent supply chain. It's not acceptable to have an out of stock because you weren't willing to talk to one of your trading partners in the process. So that was pretty loud and clear as well, specifically in the supply chain areas, being able to ensure that what's going on with that product, with that load, with that purchase order is not only known, but it's updated instantly across the entire supply chain stratosphere.
Yeah, Randy, when I look back at 2020 and I look at some of the new behaviors between retailers and manufacturers, I really hope they continue that focus on on-shelf availability and really serving the consumer, because that's what they did in 2020, and I hope that continues in 2021.
Yeah, Rick, I'm seeing the same thing. Availability drove sales for consumer products companies, the ones that had the agile supply chain and had the ability to react. That really saved a lot of companies, and it was the downside of a lot of other companies. So there's a big learning here, and the companies I'm speaking with on each end of the spectrum are really taking a look at it. So innovation, the need to change, is really driving quick investment. That's what I'm seeing, and that's what I'm hearing as well.
Paul, one of the things that was also apparent, especially when you talk about collaboration can't be manual. It has to be on the backs of a digital connection between companies so that the time to solve is shortened. It's instant if possible. But it also led to some interesting conversations about technology and its place in the business. Grocers for years have been slow to adopt, slow to invest because, well, first of all, their margins are low, but also there's a people component to it. I mentioned it earlier in the people conversation. There's a lot of worry that the technologies are going to replace jobs. And one of the sessions that was really enlightening, Susie Monford from PCC, private co-op in the Northwest, basically said, we're not fully staffed today. We're not going to be fully staffed tomorrow. So any concerns about labor or jobs going away to technology is really unfounded because I don't have enough people to do the job today. And if I can find some way to let technology do some of the administrative tasks, like, for example, sweeping floors. We've seen lots of examples of where people are putting robots out to do floor sweeps and cleanups and maintenance tasks. Those resources are not going to be laid off. They're going to be deployed to customer-facing activities that are going to provide a way to increase profitability, to become more efficient, and to offer products and services to customers that you couldn't even think about before. Collaboration with a customer, helping a customer find a product, suggesting a meal plan. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. It's not funded today because they're too busy chasing cleanup on aisle 5. Whereas in the future, if you're allowing the technology to take its rightful place in a process, then you can take the human elements and focus them where they're going to generate benefit to the company and most importantly to the customer, because it all needs to go back and be that customer-facing improvement so that your customers are seeing the investment in them, not in some technology. So it was a good analysis about how technology adoption is not to be feared, it should be embraced.
Randy, great point. I'd like to add just a couple of comments on that. So the flow and business advantage, the human brain cannot keep pace with the change and acceleration of new technology. It's just not possible, but technology can and will simplify it and manage to it. So there's the reason to embrace it. We're just running so fast that technology is built to be able to manage to it. And it does provide, like you said, task and thought leadership of employees, both on the retail and the consumer products manufacturing side. It provides the things that humans can do, new ideas, ideation, and thought leadership to support all the change that we're seeing.
Definitely agreed. Thanks, Paul. You've all shared a lot of great themes from what sounds like a great event, but I am keeping an eye on the time and we've only got a couple minutes left. So to close it out, I'm going to send it back to Randy. Randy, with your focus on grocery and retail, if you had to boil the event down into a main theme or some forward-looking predictions for this year, what would those be?
First and foremost, you have to take care of your people, both physically and emotionally. That's the number one imperative. The second one is you have to remain profitable. The decisions that you make, collaboration techniques, the technology you adopt, they all have to lead to more efficient business processes and the ability to find margin at the end of every transaction, whether it be with your customer or with your supplier base. It has to be where you're headed in everything that you do.
Yeah, I'm with you. Thanks, Randy. And Paul, what about you from a CP manufacturing perspective? Any key insights?
Yeah, Evan, I complete alignment with what Randy said, employees and in consumers' health and well-being. Obviously, it's the number one initiative for everyone, every company. But it's also a good time to reset the relationships between the retailer and the manufacturer to drive that collaboration to be successful and innovate where it matters. Know what supports the consumer's needs and support those needs. That's what I'm hearing from customers, and that's what I heard was a common theme here today at FMI.
Well, thank you all for sharing your insights from the great sessions at the FMI Midwinter Executive event.
Thanks, Evan. It was fantastic. Enjoyed it immensely and look forward to additional conversations.
Thanks, Evan. Thanks for that closing. Randy, always a pleasure. And everyone out there, I really miss collaborating with you in person. It's always been one of the highlights of my year. But I got to say that this was well run. It's virtual, maybe uncomfortable at times, but I think we made the best of it and looking forward to speaking with you.
Thanks, Evan, for having me on today. It's been fun, and I look forward to the next time.
Thank you, Randy, Paul, and Rick. It was my pleasure to have you all on and listen to these great insights recapping the event. It sounds like it's been a successful FMI thus far, and wishing you all a great weekend. If you are attending the FMI event or just listening in for the episode, please continue the conversation with us. Randy, Paul, and Rick are all available to take meetings at FMI next week. And of course, you can find us on the SAP Industries YouTube channel and our social handles, including SAP Industries and SAP Retail, or connect with us one-on-one via LinkedIn. Thank you again so much for tuning in with us today, and we look forward to sharing with you again in the future.